This is a Westley Richards Ovundo. Firstly, that name bangs. They could have called it something really cool, but they went with Ovundo, and that's fine. Secondly, it's not that conventional looking, is it? Let us have a look over tail to top and then talk about it. Starting with the woodwork, it is 14 5/8 inch stock. That includes an extension on this particular one. Nothing matters, but all Westley Richards guns back in the day would have been made to measure. So chances of finding or even talking about the stock measurements and it mattering are minimal, but they are relatively reasonable. What's quite cool on the back of this is that it has a 1 1/4 inch wooden extension that's been inked in. When you're attaching a piece of wood to a gun, to find one that is identical is quite difficult, and so you'll notice that most people ink the stocks in. They'll take the grain of the gun and they will enhance it with India ink or I think chucking nails into vinegar to create like this beautiful black dye that reacts really nice with the wood is also a thing. I say I think, it is a thing. They then also put sideways stains over it, and so from 3 feet away, if you didn't know, you wouldn't know. And that's kind of the art of an extension. You're never going to get a magnifying glass out, although there has been in the past, I've seen them actually painted in, properly painted in. That is an art. And then the stocks have been lacquered so that you don't see like the join in the slightest, that they've painted the back end and they've blended it into the grain of the stock so perfectly. That's different. But this has been inked in and refinished over the top. That in itself is an art form. I think it's wonderful. It's a straight hand stock. The shape of the stock is where this gun starts to not break convention, but it's an odd looking thing. The fact that it sort of, the lines of the stock just look ever so slightly strange. They're not ugly, but they do confuse the eye because it's not a shape of an over and under that we see every day. It's checkered all the way up to the safety tang, and that I like a lot. Not having a border, as peculiar as it may be, I quite like the fact that the checkering joins straight to the metal. It's a bit different. It does have a slightly extended trigger tang, which is lovely, actually, a trigger guard, sorry, which is, it's nice. It's not too long, it's not too short, and it's checkered all the way up to the metal and around. It has a reinforcing bolster in the head. It has the Westley Richards style top lever that pivots and pulls back off the top. It has the long beetleback safety catch. I do love that particular style. And the Westley Richards Patent 1 trigger, which is like a 2-pull semi-selective trigger. It's quite clever. They work. They work. That is quite an exciting thing. This is a 1922 gun, but the original patent was 1914. Where it's a single trigger, the trigger guard is very small. It's very tight. It's part of the style choice on this gun that the rest of it is quite big and deep, but this trigger guard is very slight with a slight bead on the edge. It's a lie, that's just the way the light was catching it. They do a Westley Richards drop lock version of the Ovundo, but this one is not. This one is just done of a standard, I say standard, off of their non-detachable lock design. It's engraved all the way around that action, which retains quite a lot of its original colour, but it's faded quite nicely with this beautiful larger canvas. It's nice, it's really good, I think. You have this beautiful texture as well over the sides of the barrel and also the action. And the shape, although unconventional, is not unpleasant. It's quite bulbous. It's interesting, but the design itself is actually more a byproduct of the design of the Lockup. The fore end is a lot shallower than usual and sort of blends in into the metalwork very, very nicely. For all of the oddities of lines, at least they are coherent in design. You have solid side ribs that actually are beautifully tapered from wide to short. I'm guessing where they were so used to building side by sides with a similar sort of tapered rib, that wasn't a big issue. And the thing that I find very interesting is the vented top rib in 1922. And although I will talk about the action design in a sec, it's interesting to me that this has a vented top rib with parallel machining It's very, very modern. Out of everything on here that didn't survive the test of time, the fact this has a vented top rib, a vented tapered top rib with a twin bead sight is cool. I do wonder whether that's an aftermarket edition, but why would it be? It's not mentioned in the cataloguing, though I am going to look on the Holtz app, which is where we're sat, by the way. In case you hadn't realised, we are actually here today at Holtz Auctioneers. They are one of the biggest gun auction houses in the world, specialising in shotguns and rifles, both antique and modern, sporting arms. Go and check their website out. Even if you're not interested in buying a gun from them, go and check their website out. You will learn so much, and the opportunity to see guns you didn't know existed is amazing. There's a link in the description. We have on here 2 3/4 inch chambers, bored 1/4 choke, action incorporating the LB Taylor and Westley Richards patent concealed hook and extension. It's not mentioned that it's non-original, so let's presume that it's original in that case. That's quite exciting. I'm guessing that was mostly to do with removing barrel weight if they did do that, rather than the solid top ribs that their competitors were using. What's interesting about the Ovundo is that it was, what, the 3rd British over and under, if you like. It started in, 1909 with the Boss action, and then in 1913 Woodward came up with their action, the Boss action being exceptional and well copied. In fact, I've got a parazzi here so we can sort of compare notes. It's not exactly the same as a Boss, but it's very similar the way that it locks up. You have the hook pretty much in line with the bottom of the bottom barrel. On some guns they actually come up higher, in certain times they're actually in line with the middle of the bottom barrel. That is where the gun pivots and opens from. You have the drawers on the side here that act as locking places. It's surface area locking up, and you have the bites that come over these 2 raised areas below the ejectors here. It's a brilliant, brilliant design that has been copied and modified slightly by many, many people. And that's what came first. What it leaves you with is this beautiful, pleasing to the eye, or maybe it's only pleasing to the eye by way of it being the most culturally significant gun design. Maybe that's it. Maybe it just looks better because we see more of it, but inherently it's just more svelte, sleeker, more pleasing in line. I mean, if we remove the pistol grip at least, it emulates, it has certain similarities in the proportions of a side-by-side. Maybe I'll shut up and just carry on. But the Woodward came thereafter. The Woodward is a little bit less common. Woodward that was then bought out by Purdy's, mostly for that over and under design. That was in 1913. And obviously at that point, Westley Richards, being one of the big players in the game, said, how do we come up with the same? They had their guys working on it, their designers. Everyone was working on it. It's competition. It's capitalism. And by 1913, they came up with this design. And actually, when we talk through it, there's a lot of really good stuff on here. Before we get into that, I genuinely think this stippled border is one of the most beautiful pieces of checkering work I have ever seen. I love that as an addition, as an extra, as a thing. I really do like it. We pull that off. That comes off really nicely. It comes off very, very nicely. That's interesting. There's sort of a reinforcing bar. It's an interesting design. I'd love to take one of these apart one day. Pull that off and we start to see. Instead of inline hooks, Westley Richards went for an underslung hook. What that gives you is a significantly deeper action. Obviously they could have had the sidewalls of the action come all the way up, but that's going to add a lot of weight, and as such they decided to slim and trim as much weight from around that action as possible. It runs a little bit like a box lock, if you like, and by that I just mean there's a lot of work in the side, so you have a slightly wider action than possible. But instead of that increased weight, they've trimmed it down, hence the unusual shape. The way that it locks up is quite interesting. Look at these 2 lumps move back in the action. They clip over the top of these. In a ASC or a DT10 that most people will be very familiar with, or DT11 now, because you know we're in 2022, you have a sliding bar that rocks over. It's a similar thing, but instead of rocking sideways, they lock back and forth. And these 2 parts here act as a hook onto the inside of the action. It is Actually a really nice design. There's no top lever hold open because when you open and close the gun, it pushes them out the way with its own hooks. It's a good design. It just doesn't look conventional. I think it would be interesting to find somebody who'd never seen an over and under shotgun and present them an Ovundo and a Boss Action and ask them which one looks better. I mean, hell, give them a 6.86 and a 5.25 at the same time. Because actually, the more I stare at it, the less, if a girl is too perfect, that is not inherently interesting. There is something very nice about actually the fact that it is slightly different. I think what it would suit is a big fat pistol grip. I think that would really aid the size and shape of it. A bit like when you see a B25 with a slim straight hand stock, there's something about that line that doesn't work quite so well, thin to fat to thin. Whereas you stick, all of a sudden, and perhaps there's some Ovundo fans out there who are now vomiting, or at least thinking, what a moron. Imagine this shape, and if we overlay them between each other, I'm gonna see if that even works. If you come up over here and see what I can see, it's an interesting thing. Maybe the Ovundo was ahead of its time. Who really knows? But the fact that you can get that extra size on that one does lead to a more pleasing line in the long term. And actually this splinter-esque forend is very reminiscent of the semi-beaver tail foreends we see today with this fat with the cutaway on top. I have one on a couple of my guns, actually. It's very, very nice in the hand. That sighting plane is remarkably familiar. Maybe, just maybe, I should have spent more time with the Ovundo before passing any judgment. Here is one of my favourite parts, by the way, the fact that the name is still engraved in the rib, but only on the side rib. This could be one of the most beautiful and classy things. There's a lot about this gun that I like, actually. Although I've said lots of nasty words about it, the more time I spend with it, the more beautiful I'm finding it. You have the name, Westley Richards, 23 Conduit Street, London. Ovundo. Tell me your thoughts. Let this gun dwell in, and then comment. Take it in. Throw away your prejudices, because that is actually important when looking at something that's this wildly different to the norm. You know, I spend a lot of time complaining that nobody does anything different, and I've got a gun here in front of me that is an over and under that is different, and actually I like it. There's a lot of mid-weight. The way that it feels in the hand, it's not a horrible gun. It was just not as commercially successful and as copied as others. But, you know, we can't complain about action size because it's not that much different in depth to a 5.25, and width-wise, it's big, it's different, it's an odd shape. I'm gonna stop talking about it. Guys, I'd love to know your thoughts, really. This gun is valued at £4,000 to £6,000. That's quite exciting. An English-built over and under from, well, it's 1922, you know, a pretty good era of English gun making. If it said Boss on it, you'd chuck a nought on the end of that. If it said Woodward on the end, probably similar sort of territory, well, you know, in the sort of 20,000 mark. It's an interesting thing. And you can definitely pass judgment on it, like I said, too quickly. Hell, I like it. There you go. I've had my mind changed. I feel like I'm on Change My Mind, and I've had my mind changed. You know, what would be nice? You know, in a lovely world where everything was possible and I had piles and piles of cash, I'd love to go to Westley Richards and say, I want an Ovundo built for 2022. Sharpen up some of the design, modernize it just a touch. Wouldn't that be cool? Take care, guys. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next time.